Hey, what's going on? It's your guy Trey Lover. And I'm just a father fighting for his children. So I realized that I've never really told you guys much about my case. So I want to take a minute to really talk to you guys about what's going on with me and some of the things I've done thus far in my journey and where I'm at. So you guys can see where I'm going to. Maybe give me some advice on my journey. But before I get started, I want to put two things on the record. One, notice the agent is notice the principal, and notice the principal is notice the agent. Also, underneath the 1871 Civil Rights Act, subsection 1986, you have an obligation to prevent neglect. So if you guys hear about something happening, violating our constitutional protected rights, and you do nothing about it, you can now be held accountable because you've been put on notice. No matter how we give you notice, whether it be on a phone call, on a letter, social media, once you guys have been made aware of violations against our constitutional protected rights, the second highest law of the land, then you guys have an obligation to do what you have to do. So our court case is for my daughter, who she's turning 5 next year, and I'm working towards getting my daughter back. Now, my daughter was taken away from me under the color of law through Kings County Family Court, which is a state court found in New York. And at that time, I didn't know much about anything to do with law. I didn't really start studying anything like that. I started studying a bit after. But internally, we all know a little something. We feel a little something. We just don't know what it is. And at that time, not have read the Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence at that time, the only thing that I knew felt wrong is that God would not want me to be separate from my daughter. God wouldn't want me to be a father to my daughter. God would want me to be a part of my daughter's life so we can grow up together, all right, as a family. I would love for the mother of the child to be there too, but if she's not, that's up to her. And I argued back and forth with them like, no, this is wrong. I don't know what you guys are doing. This you guys can't do. It's arguing back and forth with them, but not knowing exactly what to say. So I started studying a lot of different things, and I was thrown this way with contract law. I was thrown into trust law. I was thrown into accounting. I was thrown into statutes and codes. I was thrown into the Constitution. I was thrown into the Bible. I was thrown so many different ways, and I didn't exactly know which way I wanted to go. So I remember someone said something to me, and they said, choose something that's affecting your life right now. And I was like, shoot, well, I got started for my daughter, so now I'm diving into all these other things. Let me just focus on that. Let's focus on what's going on with this. And after speaking to a couple more people, I realized that everything the judges did in the family court was a violation of my constitutional protected rights. The Constitution has such rights to make sure that we are protected from any transgression, any infringements, any abridgments of our rights. The First Amendment is super powerful, and one of the top things I utilize two of the top things I use from the First Amendment is our rights to religion. Government cannot force a religion onto us. They cannot tell us we cannot have religion. We have the right to choose whatever religion we want, whether it's the Christian way, the Catholic way, the whatever way. We have a right to choose our religion. So I grasped that. Studying deeper, I learned that the constitutional isn't the first law of the land, it is the second law of the land. If you guys look up Public Law 97-280, once again, that's Public Law 97-280. It was signed on October 4th, 1982 by every member of Congress and the president, where they acknowledged that the Bible is the original law of the land, and the Constitution was formed after the Bible on the premise of the Bible. And they deemed 1983 as the year of the Bible. So religion is very powerful when it comes to law and Constitution. We just never understood these things. So understanding what the constitutional violations were, they violated with my freedom of religion, they violated my freedom of speech, they violated my Second Amendment right to carry gun, to bear arms, because they said I couldn't bear any arms anymore. They violated my Fourth Amendment right by illegal search and seizure, my rights to privacy. They basically took everything away from me. They searched me. I was locked up. They violated my Fifth and the Sixth, the right to go to court, to know my accusers, to know who my accusers are, to bring witness, to bring my own case to bring a defense against them. They violated a lot of my constitutional rights. Just goes over. They violated my non-constitutional right, which is an unenumerated right because it doesn't really say directly what's inside of it, but You have the right to be your father and so many other things. I don't know right now. I cannot remember the 8th Amendment of the Constitution. I should know this, right? I've been studying it because I'm pretty sure they also violated my 8th Amendment, right? Which is to excessive bail not required or excess fines, nor cruel and unusual punishment. Well, I don't know about you guys, right? What do you cruel and unusual punishment is personable, right? So what do you consider cruel and unusual punishment? So for me, a very cruel and unusual punishment is taking my daughter away from me, right? This is a punishment that was imposed to me without having a grand jury indictment. So without following due process, because you can only be held to any kind of law after you have been pled guilty to a grand jury indictment. But that didn't happen, right? They violated a lot of things. They just hit me with, and I was so baffled about it. So I started doing some research more about how do we deal with constitutional violations. And within my studies, I learned that if we have a constitutional issue, we take that to the real courts of this land. Now, the Constitution says that the Supreme Courts and its inferior courts will deal with these constitutional violations. And that covers the Supreme Court, the next level down to Circuit Court, the next level down into District Court. That's it. All the state courts and other courts, they don't deal with the Constitution. But at the same time, they cannot make any law that's repugnant of the Constitution. The Constitution says this, they cannot do anything different. They can make their own laws in their municipalities, but they cannot make any law that's contradictory to the Constitution. And that was also spoken about in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that gave states the right to make any laws that helps them conduct business throughout the days and daily activities, as long as it made no law that violated any portion of the Constitution. So for me, as long as they upheld the Constitution, we were good. So I contacted the district court in my region, which is the Eastern District Court, and I submitted a writ of mandamus and a writ of quo warranto to the Eastern District Court. A writ of mandamus is an order from a higher court to a lower court to compel them to do the right thing. A writ of quo warranto is to find out by what authority that they have permission to to trespass against my rights. So I issued these, and on my court case, I got placed with Judge Hector Gonzalez, and the Clerk of Court was Brianna Mahoney. Now, dealing with them, they dismissed my case claiming lack of subject matter jurisdiction and immunity. And that just didn't feel right to me, right? So I'm trying to comprehend how that works. So I read back again the Constitution, and looking at the First Amendment of the Constitution, it says that we have the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. Okay, well, I have grievances. I petition the government, but they're not doing anything. So it doesn't make any sense to me. So I continued further studying, and I realized they have an oath of office, and they have to be held accountable for that. So reading their oath of office, they state that without having respect to others, that they will uphold the law. So what does that mean to me? So that means no matter who you are, whether you're a living man or woman, whether you're a construction worker, whether you are a teacher, whether you're a photographer, whether you're a stripper, whether you're a judge, that if you violated the law, that they have an obligation to hold you accountable for any transgression you may have imposed upon the people. So I was baffled about how can they dismiss my case with any of these claims. So I started looking up what is lack of subject matter jurisdiction, and when I paid attention to that, I found out that that was false. This is completely subject matter jurisdiction because it's a constitutional violation, which is what they handle. But these district courts try to pass the powers down to the state courts that have usurped the powers of the district courts. They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to take care of constitutional violation. In the old writs, which covers writ of mandamus, writ of quo warranto, and everything else, it states that district court has the original jurisdiction. There's Supreme Court cases like Hamburg v. Hamburg that talks about child support being unconstitutional to violate the separation of powers, and it says once again that district court is the original jurisdiction for these type of matter. These are constitutional violations. So I knew the claim of lack of subject matter jurisdiction was nonsense. So now I looked up immunity, because judges have immunity, and please comprehend this. I do 100% believe in immunity, Because if a judge is doing their job correctly, following the Constitution, following God's law, and they're acting in a civil manner, then they should have nothing to worry about. But of course, there can be people out there who don't have the best interests in heart, who can frivolously try to sue judges and keep them busy, and they can tie up the courts. And in doing so, people that need justice won't get the justice that they need because the courts are busy dealing with things that are unnecessary. So immunity makes sense. But to see if immunity qualifies, immunity has a two-part test. And the two-part test covers one, was there a law that was violated? Well, the Constitution gave me certain laws, certain rights, because a right is something that you have. So yes, my rights were violated, right? Then the second part of the test is it a well-established law? Well, I can't remember exactly what year the Constitution was made, so you guys can laugh at me right now. But the Constitution, I'm pretty sure, is a very well-established law, right? This is probably back in the 1700s this has been established. So they cannot say they didn't know. Any judge, any magistrate that is not a judge, because magistrates cannot be judged, any chief justice, any of these individuals would know that my constitutional protected rights are covered, and therefore immunity doesn't exist. So when they claim lack of subject matter jurisdiction and they claim immunity, that's a violation. That cannot be so. So I had to do more research into how do we handle these. So I sent a request to the judge asking them for their bond number, asking them for their oath of office, and asking them for the anti-bribery statement. I don't just want this from the judge because it's come to my standing that judges do have a lot of power, but to my comprehension at this moment, the highest individual in the court is the clerk of court. So I didn't just ask the judge for these information if it is relative. I also asked the clerk of court for these information. They responded back and said that my request was vexatious, that I shouldn't be asking for such things. I'm just having frivolous arguments with them. That's a violation because I have the right to ask for certain things, and that's underneath the FOIA Act, the Freedom of Information Act. I have the right to know whoever is handling these proceedings above me, if they are properly licensed to handle these type of proceedings. And they did not give me the anti-bribery statement, the oath of office, or their bond number. So I was like, okay, I'm really going against people who do not follow the law. These judges and these clerks and these individuals who claim they follow, they don't. So I decided to continue going forward, and what I did is I started contacting the three-letter agencies because there's three portions of government: judicial, legislative, and executive. And when one part is acting out, the other parts are supposed to hold the other part accountable. So since the judicial, the judges part of the branch was acting up, I decided to contact the legislative. Am I saying it right? The legislative part of the branch, I believe, if I'm saying it right. It could be wrong. Maybe it's the executive, but I think it's the executive. But these are the FBI, the DOJ, the PIN. I decided to contact these agencies because their job is to uphold the Constitution. And if anyone, no matter who it is, violates the Constitution, they're supposed to make sure they hold them accountable. Right? 1 second. So I reached out to them and to see if I can get help. Directly, I reached out to Kristen Clark, she is the Chief Attorney General for the Department of Justice, and she wrote a letter on April 20th, 2023 called the Dear Colleague Letter, where she wrote to the judges, lawyers, other attorneys about the unlawful acts that have been taking place in marginalized communities such as mine, quote unquote, colored community, black communities, whatnot, that are being inflicted with these horrible damages based on these courts because they violated due process. In that violation of due process, they've been imposing very onerous and very quasi-criminal sanctions, treating very minor infractions like their criminal court cases and locking up people that don't need to be locked up for such minor details. For civil actions, they just might have to pay a fine or do something. For criminal actions, you might have some jail time, depending if it's infamous or not. So depending on what's going on, there's certain obligations that have to be held. So I wrote a letter to Kristen Clark from the Department of Justice, letting her know exactly what took place with the Eastern District Court and Family Court with my court case on the constitutional violations. I sent out to not only Kristen Clark, but the other two co-authors inside of that letter to hopefully get a response. And that's from the DOJ. I also wrote the FBI at that time because I didn't know that the DOJ was a subcategory of the FBI. So I didn't know this. So I just wrote them too because my job is to put everybody on notice. Because even though notice the agent is notice the principal, notice the principal, notice the agent, we have to make sure they get it. And I wanted to make sure they got my paperwork. So I wrote them. I started a Telegram group to study with other individuals, and one of the individuals sent me another group called the PIN. And this one took me a while to get the name because even though it's PIN, it stands for the Public Integrity Section. And they are also a subcategory of the Department of Justice. And their direct job is to hold judges and other people of high official magnitudes accountable when they violate the Constitution. So I wrote that, and the PIN is their chief is Corey Amundsen. So I sent them a letter, and everything I sent is certified mail. So it was tracked. I know these agencies got it, but yet still, none of them have contacted me back. None of them reached out to me. So one of the next thing I'm planning on doing is doing an amicus curiae brief, getting some friends of the court to submit documentation to the court. These are impartial parties that have no benefit to my case, and getting them to put something on the record so other people can talk about the constitutional violation that would happen. Also comprehending the definition of treason that says two or more individuals must claim that treasonous acts are happening in court, or it must be confessed by the individual. Now, to my comprehension, court isn't the building, the courthouse. The courthouse is just the house of court. And court is the piece of paper because we deal with everything through the piece of paper. Our name, what we're dealing with, we put our issues. We send it to the courthouse that houses these papers, and then the judges listen to the case, and the grand jury would decide the facts in the case, and then we would come to a resolution. So I sent everything out, and if I can get them to do an amicus curiae brief, I'm sorry, I got turned around for a minute. If I can get someone else to do an amicus curiae brief, because I believe that Hector Gonzalez, Brianna Mahoney, Judge Adele Alexis Harris, and every other judge in my case have committed treason as they have violated my rights. And treason is as simple as violating the Constitution because you're waging war against the Constitution. Now, I don't know much people in New York who study the Constitution, so getting them to say that treasonous acts happen to put on the record would be hard. So getting into Telegram and building a group, I have other individuals who also study the Constitution. So now if they can do an amicus curiae brief for me and put treasonous acts on the record, we now have me saying there's treason and someone else saying there's treason. If two or more individuals claim treason, then they could be looked at for treason. So I'm looking to have amicus curiae briefs happen so we can talk with them. But even with all of this, I have this fear that nothing's going to happen because the Declaration of Independence, we were independent in July 2nd, 1776. I know some of you guys are going to say July 4th, 1776, but from what I believe, it was July 2nd, 1776 is when we became independent, but then they made it aware and signed the papers on July 4th, 1776. I could be wrong, but you guys let me know. So reading the Declaration of Independence and what King John did back in the days with his tyrannical actions against America and how he was waging war against our Constitution, it's so funny how everything is a full circle and we're going back in a full circle. And we're going to have to do the same things we had to do before to deal with this. But part of what they spoke about is how these agencies, how the government, until people realize our truest power, which is for us to represent ourselves, because we have the sovereign right to represent ourselves in court. We have the right to be counsel. Because the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution does not give you the right to a lawyer or attorney. It gives you the right to legal counsel. And all members of We the People, we can counsel each other. So reading the Declaration of Independence, it was clear to see that no matter what we do or many things that we do, these companies won't listen to. Not until we begin to protect ourselves. And that right was given to us in the Second Amendment of the Constitution. It gives us the right to bear arms and form our own militia in case there's a tyrannical government that's imposing quasi-criminal and onerous sanctions against us. So we the people do need to come together and start holding these individuals accountable. And me putting this out in the record isn't just for you guys to know, but it's so I believe my social medias are going to grow. And as agents of the government see this video, they have an obligation, because notice the agent is knows the principal and knows the principal is knows the agent. So once I tell one of them, the entire agency knows. I don't care if you tell the receptionist at the front door of a building. From the moment you told the receptionist, everybody in the building is supposed to be notified. That's what that phrase means. And then underneath the 1871 Civil Rights Act, subsection 1986, every single member of that agency has an obligation to prevent neglect. Neglect of the Constitution, neglect of our constitutional protected rights, neglect of our rights, freedom of religion under God to raise our families. So they're being put underneath notice. And now if two or more individuals conspire to deprive me of my right, that's a violation of 1871 Civil Rights Act subsection 1985. And if anyone violates our constitutional protected rights, we can sue them underneath the 1871 Civil Rights Act subsection 1983. So right now, I love the fact that people like Tawana Dowling, people like the Brunson brothers, Larry and Lloyd Brunson, they're fighting the Supreme Court. They're going to the Supreme Court, and they're fighting to protect our unalienable rights, our rights to be parents, our rights to travel this land, our rights to travel, our rights to be with our children, our rights to bear arms. Because the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence says something very important, right? We have certain rights that no matter what we do, we cannot lose our rights. We can't contract them away, we can't sign them away, we can't shake hands and give them away, we can't nod heads, we cannot give away these rights. And these are called unalienable rights. And what it says in the Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that right there also gives you support as to what a crime is, in a sense, right? Because if it says all individuals have the right to life, liberty, and happiness, pursuit of happiness, then as long as you're living in that life, then you should be good. But as long as you don't stop anyone from doing those things, you were good. So anytime you stop someone from exercising their rights, you are committing a crime. So let's say someone's walking down the street and you kidnap them, illegal search and seizure, right? I always take it back to the Constitution, and you're committed a crime. If you're walking down the street drinking a bottle of alcohol, who's hurt? Who's the injured party? I'm not stopping anyone from enjoying their life, but I'm enjoying my life, my liberty, my pursuit of happiness by drinking. Or if I'm driving 100 miles per hour, who did I hurt? No one. There is no crime. I'm enjoying my rights to life, living in pursuit of happiness. A crime exists when you stop somebody's pursuit of life, living in pursuit of happiness. So as long as I don't do that, I didn't violate the Constitution, I'm living my rights. These government agencies are violating our rights every day. Telling people they can't travel, telling people they can't bear arms, telling people they can't have family by losing their children, telling people these, basically putting them back into slavery with the 13th Amendment, which never got rid of slavery, but simply transitioned slavery into a different way. That they have to be indicted to be able to have any kind of penalties placed against them. So that's why I feel a lot of these court systems are bypassing the grand jury indictment, because it's a great way for them to increase slavery. Because if they can bypass due process, they can find as many people as possible guilty, they can get them locked up and thrown inside jail, and then they can get them to work for pennies on a dollar. That's also called a bill of attainder, as is a arrested judgment to a default judgment and imposing penalties against you. And that's very unconstitutional. That's actually written in the Constitution. I don't know what page, but it's written in the Constitution. So paying attention to what's going on, it's clear to see that we need to have another movement. The Civil Rights Movement of 1871 helped us get the government to act more accordingly. But even with that, they're still not there. And it's come to a point in time where I'm starting to realize that the government that we have is corrupt. They have usurped the powers of us individuals living, of living men and women living. They are treating us like we are their servants when they are literally called public servants. They are servants to the public, to us. The government derives their power from those that are governed. We give them the power to do these things, but yet still they make us feel like we're their slaves so they can control us. If we don't begin to stand up and fight for our rights will continue to be trampled on. We need to understand that we need to start fighting back and holding them accountable. Because if we don't, what's going to happen later on down the line with your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren? If they keep on chipping away and breaking away at the Constitution and taking away our rights at this point, and each time it's getting worse and worse, what's going to happen in a couple of more years when your grandchildren are trying to walk down the street? All right, they're going to stop them from traveling. We're going to go back into martial law. They're going to control all of our movements. We have to realize that we have to stand up and fight for rights, because if we don't, they're going to continue violating our rights. So with this notice, I want to say again, to Judge Hector Gonzalez, to Clerk of Court Brandon Mahoney, to Kristen Clark, to from the PIN Corey Amadson, you guys have been put in notice that my rights are being violated, and there's many rights that are being violated. These are treasonous acts that are being imposed upon us, and you guys have an obligation, a duty to make sure that we the people are being protected from any violation of this right. Because the Constitution can only be handled in two ways. People like to say the Constitution can be interpreted, but I don't believe so. The Constitution can only be handled in two ways. It can either be upheld or it can be violated. So if you guys are not upholding the Constitution, you're all in violation of the Constitution by not protecting our rights. And you guys can all be held accountable. And when Tawana Dowling is successful, when the Brunson brothers are successful, and we start getting changes to our government, to our Supreme Courts, to our circuit courts, to our district courts, to our three-letter agencies supposed to protect us. And when we get these things to be set in place properly, all of you guys are gonna have to look back and say that I do everything possible to protect we the people from any damages, any infringements on their rights. And if you're not able to say yes, then you will be held accountable for your malfeasance too. Because whether by your own acts or omissions, if you don't do what needs to be done to protect us, then you're part of the conspiracy against our rights. So I'm calling out to all members of We the People. I'm looking for certain people to be a part of my community. I'm looking for an accountant. I am looking for a lawyer, not because I want you to be a lawyer, because I want you to know the processes that they do. Because although I'm studying a lot of information, I'm still new to their process, the paperwork, the documentation. So we're looking for a lawyer too. We're also looking for a notary. And just so we can start getting some things moving forward. Any high government officials that understand that rights are being infringed upon, we're calling upon you to be a part of this. And yes, it's a scary battle to understand that all your colleagues and friends, if you transition over to start protecting the Constitution, will turn against you. You have an obligation to do so. And if you're looking for inspiration, look at Tawana Downing. He was a lawyer, I believe, studied law, and realized that we were being violated every day, and decided not to keep on the same pace as all other lawyers just to get a quick paycheck, but to make sure that people are doing the right thing and protecting our rights. So if you have studied law to protect individuals, utilize your license, right, from the BAR, the British Accreditation Registry, which is a British company. They're not even government entities, but you have an education. You have sets of system, you know people, you have certain level of connections that you can utilize to help do things in a better way, to help protect people. So we are reaching out to you to make a difference because we need your help, because rights are being trampled on every single day to good people, to good individuals, all right? We are protected by the Constitution, whether you're a citizen or not. If you've been on this land, the Constitution protects you. So understand that we need all support. I'm calling out to all of you guys, help us out. Because if we don't fight for a difference, when is it gonna stop? Who is it gonna stop with? And most you like to say it hasn't affected you, but guess what? For a long time, it didn't affect me and many people who just turned a blind eye to it until it affected our life and we were forced into the fight. So are you gonna be forced into the fight by them violating your rights? Or are you gonna realize that something is wrong and start standing up to fight to make a difference? The time is now. We need you more than ever to get up and make a difference, because if we don't do it, it ain't never gonna change. It's your boy Trey Lover.